was telling the other day, Sharatharan was the person who gave me a few documentaries, in early 2000, and one of the documentaries that I loved those days is Lesser Humans.
Right.
તો કોઈ જવા જ નથી દેતા. આ અમારે મોળાખતની પૂજા કરવી હોય તો બહાર બેસીને કરવાની, અંદર નહીં જવાનું. એવી રીતે.
પણ અહીંયા આગળ આપણે ચા લેવા જઈએ ને તો આપણે ચાની કેટલીથી દૂર હટાવે કે ચલો તમે દૂર હટી જાઓ, તમારા ગ્લાસ અલગ રાખો. આવી પ્રથા છે અહીંયા આગળ.
અમારે નોખા ગ્લાસ, અમારે નોખા ગ્લાસ રાખે. હળિયેલા હોય તો ભલે, ઓલા હોય તો અમારે નોખા ગ્લાસ ધોઈને પાણી
એમને આ કપમાં ના પીવાય ને?
એ કપમાં નહીં.
ત્યાં એમને દૂધ પોતાનો કપ પીધો.
હમણાં પીવે નહીં પાછા બીજા.
એવું નથી ભાઈ, એવું નથી, સમજતા નથી. ઈ જે કઈ કે છે એવું નથી. ઈ લોકો એનું જુદું રાખે છે એટલે ભંગી સમાજ છે. હરિજન નથી. હરિજન જો આ રહ્યા બાકી આ માબડછેડ છે એવું કોઈ છે જ નહીં અહીંયા.
And we were fortunate to, meet when you came down to Kerala to show India Untouched. And that was another shocking experience because we believed that Kerala is far out of this.
From these caste realities, yeah.
અંદર નથી આવું? કેમ?
આપણે એટલે તમે તો ન આવડે.
તમે કોનાથી અપડાવો?
છે બધા લોક ઇન્ડિયન ઘરે આપડા અભિષેક મટાડ દો બધા કામ કરનાર.
Yeah, today is a day, March 31st, a day which we cannot forget because we lost much beyond our friend. It is Sharatharan is, you ask anyone in their 30s, 40s, and today, they will, Sharatharan would be the one who would have, shown the path to them for documentary, the power of filmmaking, the power of movies, and of course a great friend, environmentalist. Lots to talk about Sharatharan.
വീടല്ലോ നമ്മളത്ര പൊൻകിനാവിൻ വിത്തു നട്ടു, അതിനല്ലോ നമ്മളത്ര ചോര കൊണ്ടു നീർനനച്ചു. ഒരുപാടു ജീവിതങ്ങൾ ഈ തടത്തിൽ വളമിട്ടു, ഒരുമിച്ചു ചേർന്നു നമ്മൾ ഈ നിലത്തിൽ കാവൽ നിന്നു. തിന്താരാ 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 തിമികതാര, തിന്താരാ 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 തിമികതാര.
Yeah, I miss him. I do. I do miss him. For me, it was not just a loss of a colleague and a friend and a fellow filmmaker, but he was also, to a large extent, my conduit to Kerala, my pipeline.
So I'm keen to know how you met first.
Sharath?
Yes.
I met because of Lesser Humans. I met Sharath the same year I think we met, back in 2000, so about 22 years back. I had finished making Lesser Humans in about 98. And then it went to several festivals, won some awards, people wrote about it in the media. So because of that, and I was traveling quite a bit with the film. And then Sharath, I don't remember who put me in touch with him, but he got in touch and then suggested that, can you bring the film to Kerala? And then he started talking about his work of touring with documentaries, and we immediately connected on that because at that time and less so now, the culture of documentary filmmakers traveling and showing films wasn't around. Only a few of us documentary filmmakers, especially if you want to call activist filmmakers, were mostly doing the normal sort of film festival circuits and then maybe selling DVDs to libraries and institutions. But I came from a tradition where I believed in showing the film that we make back to the communities we film with first. So I had this practice since the time I started making films back in 1991. But I was so passionate about involving communities I work with as much as possible, as much as technology would allow. And so when Sarath spoke to me about his efforts to not just travel with his films, but everybody else's films, I was like on board. I said, yeah, let's do it. When do you want me to come? So we were speaking a lot on those days or during those early years. And then, of course, I came over to Kerala with Lesser Humans, traveled with him. And we spent some really quality time together, not just talking about cast, but also talking about, Sarath, to my knowledge, at least then, his work, his direct work was, if I understand correctly, was limited to Kerala, but he showed films from around the world. So he knew what was going around. Meanwhile, I am from Gujarat, and I have my roots in Kerala, but I was born in Pune and raised in Ahmedabad. And my work had taken me all over the country, in many parts of the country, etc. So we were sort of comparing notes. And I remember Lesser Humans was, unlike my other film, my later film, India Untouched, Lesser Humans was restricted to just Gujarat. And clearly, one of the discussion points after the film screening, was about this fact that, yeah, Gujarat seems to be, like really backward on the issue of caste. And I was like, not really. I mean, we have caste playing out in unfortunately, every part of the country, and wherever Indians and South Asians are, we see caste, and not just Indians and South Asians, but also certain other communities, like the Ozu tribe in Japan and certain tribes in Nigeria have something similar. They may not call it caste. The word caste comes from casta, which is a Portuguese word. Not that Portuguese had a caste system, but they probably gave it a name because they were here for 400 plus years. So I remember speaking with him a lot about trying to understand how caste plays out in Kerala. Also because, as I said, although ethnically I am from Kerala, both my parents are from there, but I was a tourist all of my childhood and growing up years. I visited Kerala practically only ever with my mother, mostly for summer vacations, weddings and such. So I never had the opportunity to interact with Kerala and the people and the culture and all of that at a professional level, as an activist, as a filmmaker. I had a brief encounter with Kerala professionally in, I believe it was 97, when I just happened to be doing post-production work of a film that we were making in Chitranjali in Trivandrum. So at that time, during the breaks, I would be sort of wandering around the studio and people would come up and not recognize me because I had no connections. But the word would get around and they would say, hey, this guy is so-and-so's son. We should go speak with him. So I had that momentary interaction with people, my sort of fraternity in Kerala. But the first time I got a real introduction to a first-hand experience and the opportunity to talk and speak with activists, writers, and filmmakers and journalists and artists in Kerala was because of Sharad, because he was the one who introduced me to that side that I had missed, in spite of the fact that both my parents are from that, Also, I'm limited. I'm severely limited because I can't read and write Malayalam, so I don't have the access to that literature and access to media and all of and such. So yeah, so he played the most crucial role for me to sort of reconnect in a different way to my sort of ethnic place. Yeah. And we had some very, very, very interesting conversations about activism, filmmaking, the future of documentaries, and talking about caste in Kerala, where on one hand, even back then, 22 years back, I was seeing the rise in popularity of organizations like the Nair Seva Samaj, the NSS, and other such organizations coming together based on caste identities. And I was like, what's this? Is this not like, we carry our caste names in our surnames. And Kerala is no different, maybe a little bit different, like people like Sarath did not carry his caste name, at least not to my knowledge. And he was always Sarath or C. Sarath Chandran for people who formally knew him. But for us, he was just Sarath. But we had this very, very interesting conversations about caste and where it is and how it's deep-seated in the caste in Kerala. It was, and of course, we spoke a lot about environment and Plachimada and Mao Rayan struggle before that and Silent Valley protests and his involvement in that. There's also because of him that I met Babu, and another amazing character. So he was a great soul. I mean, he made sure, and I'm sure he did this with lots of traveling filmmakers. He made sure that I met everybody that I should meet. When I would go to a district, he had it sorted. He would make me meet with students and faculty members and journalists and writers and artists and some very interesting people and some very weird people too. But it was all part of the game. It was all part of the fun. It was, yeah. And then we became friends, obviously. And he would call every now and then, just asking about updates. And then when I was working on India Untouched, and I started working on India Untouched just after the riots in Gujarat. So 2004, I started picking up my thoughts on the other film. And then I traveled to Kerala to shoot for that film as well. And so I, again, physically reconnected. In between, of course, there was Vibgyor that we reconnected on. And also in 2002, we had lots of exchanges because of the riots, and he wanted to understand what was going on. He was very keen. He also talked about coming over. He was constantly pushing me that, are you going to make a film? What's happening? And if I'm not mistaken, it was he who put Gopal in touch with me. If I'm not mistaken, I'm forgetting now. So he was that sort of a person, right? I mean, for him, it was not just about making films and doing activism and showing films. It was also about how do you make these connections? And he documentaries and cinema and film was his world. And everybody who belonged to that was part of his world. He's not the only one who who worked like that, but he's definitely one of the rare ones. There are not too many of those people. So it was absolutely wonderful to be with someone who's so similar in thinking and work and struggles and personal struggles and money, and constantly talking about how do we make this happen. Like, there's so much cost involved, and so we spoke about sending him over a projector and all kinds of stuff. Money was always a tension point, and people don't often realize that most of the work done by people like Sarath are on goodwill. It's completely on goodwill. He called someone like me and he would say that, listen, I'm organizing it. I don't have the money to pay for your travel. You stay on your cost, you travel on your cost, you bring yourself to Kerala on your cost. And then often, I would have to also pitch in money for venue costs and rentals and such, which one would happily do, because how can you expect someone like him to bear these costs? So everybody who came to the screenings, I don't think they fully realized the amount of effort and the pain and the heartache that goes into curating films and watching them and presenting them and calling filmmakers. I don't think the appreciation was, of course, people in the scene, like, filmmakers and his friends and his colleagues like Babu, and people absolutely appreciated what he was doing. But I don't think everybody who came to the screening really fully understood the story behind how you put these things together. It's not easy. It wasn't easy then. It is not easy now. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. That was a time when, in 2010, hardly there was a social media. Of course, he had attempted a little bit of Twitter and Facebook, but then, and he could reach to, each and every nook and corner of, I think, in Kerala, definitely, in other parts of the country as well.
Yeah.
And the kind of energy that he has. So I have a couple of times I have traveled with him from Kochi while he was traveling to Palakkad. And that too will be at midnight or past midnight, so that he can join the strike which is happening early in the morning.
Yeah.
So, you already said people come paying, oneself for these kind of events, but because there is no return, as in there is no financial return. You have to financially support ourselves. What was the force that was getting attracted to while doing that, and how did Sarath support you in kind of doing more documentaries or more of such video events?
The reason why people like us did what he did, and people like us continue doing what we do, is cinema or films or documentaries for Sarath, as well as for me and many others like myself, is not the end in itself. It was never the end in itself. It was a means to do something else, and it was a medium to raise and provocate certain questions that ought to happen in the society amongst educated and all kinds of people. So cinema is a provocator, and that has been the role of all art. Whether you would call it political art or political cinema or not, that's what you end up doing. So-called non-political films are also extremely political. By not taking a position, you have taken a position. By not speaking about an issue, you have taken a position. There is no non-positional art. I don't prescribe to that idea. We categorize for the sake of convenience. Art cinema and parallel cinema and documentaries. And yes, there are two branches as far as cinema is concerned. There is a fiction and there is a non-fiction. But that's just the types of, two big types. But agenda, there are fiction films made with agenda, and there are documentaries made with all kinds of agendas. And I never shied away, neither did Sarath shy away from using our cameras and our minds and our experience in furthering a thought that we believed should be discussed. So if you believe in that, then you can't stop at just making films. It's a futile exercise. What's the point? What is the point of just making a film? And remember, this is the pre-YouTube days. So it's not like there is some reservoir of audience lying somewhere and you could just tap into it by doing something like what we are doing. You put it in the ether. It's, people call it the cloud and the space. It's a black hole. I mean, sometimes you get to the video, sometimes you don't. And if you really want, this video that you're making now to be seen, if you had money, you would put a lot of money in pushing it out. Otherwise, you're not getting eyeballs. So we, as content creators, we do a lot of efforts to make sure that things are seen. But when Sharath was doing what he was doing, we didn't have the opportunity of what we call the digital space. So publishing was still very, very expensive. So self-promoting your film, allowing piracy of your films, not restricting the control. So all the films that I made were copyleft. In fact, when India Untouched was released, I said, it's not just copyleft, it's right to copy. You have a right to copy this. Because I didn't make it from my money. I gathered money from people who had money. And once that was done, the purpose was served, the next job. So I often, and Sarath and I spoke about this quite a lot, that cinema, much like theater, is a 3-act play. The first act is, you bring your concepts together, you line up your finances, you do your research, you figure out what is your film in your head, you draw things out, write things out. That's your first act. The second act is a production. You make it, you spend time doing it. And the third act, which is the most crucial act where everything comes together, is showing the film. Also, a lot of documentary filmmakers don't follow this. They just do the first 2 acts and that's it. They're happy. We were not happy with that because we thought it was an incomplete process. So it would have been surprising if people like me and many others like me and people like Sarath would not connect. That would be surprising. So those connect was very easy. Sarath did take me to Kannava in Wayanad with Baby's project, and I spent some time there, stayed a night, spent some time with the kids there. And I remember that he was very keen that I go there, because he had made a film for them, and they were also making films because Baby is the writer and maker and all that. But he was like, no, we have to go. So we traveled quite a lot, all the way into the forest of Wayanad to meet that, and thank goodness he did that because he really. One, I got the opportunity to meet Baby and his whole team, which I would not have had the opportunity, and see the project, interact with these kids. Did some workshops with them, like since you're there, you'd sort of do something. And then, of course, when Kannava came to, they would do their shows for fundraising. They do this, like dance and music shows, the kids. And because of that connection, I invited Baby and his team to come to Ahmedabad for fundraising. And then that was what Sarath wanted, right? I mean, you meet those connections. And then he knew that if like-minded people come together, things will happen. And that's what social media is supposed to do, right? We are social human beings. And what the platforms enable is for us to connect. So we were doing that without the platform on a one-on-one in-person basis. That was the difference. So our scopes were limited because we had limited resources. I mean, it would have been. I often think about this, that what would have been the discussion if Sarat was alive, let's say in 2015 and after, because that's when the social media exploded. It would have been very interesting discussion to see that should we do screenings or should we do digital archive, and like should we like spam people's WhatsApp messages with the documentaries. And I'm sure that would have been one of the discussions. And I'm very sure that we would have all said, yes, we do all of that, but we should continue traveling with films, because you cannot replace the one-on-one experience. You just cannot replace it. So I'm sure I often think about these things, that what if he was around? What a lovely discussion we would have had. And, but Sarat, was also, I kept communicating with him throughout the time that he was alive. And he was, if he were alive, he would have been very irritated with me for having stopped making films. I know that. Because in 2008, I finished India Untouched. And for the next 3-4 years, I was busy setting up, what I do now, which is video volunteers and the network of community correspondents and grassroots filmmaking and all of that. I was sort of figuring that out at the same time, traveling with India Untouched all over the world. So he was happy that was happening. But maybe by 2012, he would have said, come on now. Like Anand used to tell me, when are you making your films? And I'm like, I'm not making anymore. So that would have, I'm sure he would have called for that.
And just when you brought Anand's name, Anandji, said that you're quite courageous. While there were favoritism and psychophancy all around, you had your ideology, and you never feared anyone. While you were making, you had strong values to keep. What was the source? I know Achin. The traditional.
He was not a source at all. I mean, my father was not a source for me for anything, because let's be honest here. I mean, he and I didn't spend any time together. All told, maybe 15 days throughout my lifetime. So it would have been physically impossible for him to be a source for me. For me, he was a source of curiosity. I wanted to understand where he comes from, what makes a person like him. More so, and I discussed this quite a bit with Sarat as well when I was traveling with him, that for me, my father would have been an art project, a documentary project. Not so much to understand him, but a way to understand the Kerala society, the Malayalis intellectual artistic society, as to what's the combination that makes Surasu happen. And I was told that there were 4 other characters like him. And I had my own hypothesis and understanding and observations, and I was keen to sort of make that journey through what I know, which is filmmaking. So that he's not played any part in my upbringing or my values or any of that. My mother has, because people often miss the point that, I had a very loving and a very strong mother. I still have. And I find it quite sexist that people don't naturally attribute. They never ask. In Kerala particularly, people don't ask me, so is your mother your source of inspiration? I mean, for me, not asking that is absolutely a sexist mindset. And most of the people who know Surasu and make that connection with me also know, or should have known, that we never stayed together. So no, he wasn't. Cinema and television and moving images was introduced to me by my mother, because my mother One, she was also a theater person. She was deeply interested in cinema herself. She still is. And she worked for 30 plus years in the Indian Space Research Organization, the Ahmedabad part of it. And the Ahmedabad Indian Space Research Organization was responsible for the satellite instructional television experiment, which means development communication was, in a sense, invented in Ahmedabad. So when we were kids, me and my sister, my mother didn't have, we were very poor growing up. And so my mother didn't have money to often travel to places for vacation. So she would say, come over to the office during breaks. And so we would be there and just watch all those massive studios and cameras and, you know, productions and producers. And so I was exposed to that by my mother. So yeah, I mean, the other bit about the inspiration bit is, as you're saying, that what gives people like us the courage. You know, courage, I mean, you may call it courage. I mean, I would like to call it conviction. Because courage is a little, can I have a sort of a Massachusetts sort of tone to it? I don't know if it's courage, but yeah, you have the courage of your conviction. You have the courage to sort of stick to your convictions. And that comes from multiple sources. The first and foremost source is that if you are working in the field of human rights, so all my theater that I did, my street play experiences, my film experiences, the organizations that I formed to do this work, they're all centered around the principles of human rights. Now, because you've chosen that path, you are meeting people who are struggling to keep their dignity, who are fighting several causes, you know, and they inspire you. So when I was making Lesser Humans or India Untouched, I met so many very inspiring people who are trying in their ways to break this godforsaken, horrible caste system, oppressive and violent system. And how can you not be inspired? So when you're inspired by their life stories and you are documenting it and creating it into a film where you know that you will somewhere, somehow get recognition because of their struggles, because of their stories of oppression and how they came out of it. And, you know, you're sort of pimping people's life experiences. All documentary makers do that. You know, so if I'm making a film about a famous musician, I am not creating that music. That musician is creating that music. I'm making a film on that person. So unless you have a collaborative nature in that production, plus what do you do after, right? So for me, the sense of I am not the activist, I am documenting other activists. So what is my activism? What is my role then? Is it just making films? And that was always troubling. That part of it was always troubling. And so going back and showing films and talking about the issue and being convinced about and certain subjects draw you more. And so for me, the subjects of caste and gender and religious intolerance, because of my upbringing, because of my experiences, and because of the fact that I'm from Gujarat, all of these three subjects always stayed at the top of my, so that gives you the conviction to continue doing what you do. And for me, the reason why I shifted completely or stopped making films is because in the from 91 to 2008, in those whatever years, I made about 18 films. But from 2010 till now, my team of people out in the villages together have made 18,000 films. Now, you can't compete with those numbers. And all said and done, I have very strong Gujarati roots, cultural roots, you know. And at some point, you start thinking the cost-benefit analysis, that you have limited time on this planet, you have limited resources. How do you best expend it? So after doing 4 years of work on India Untouched, I was like, I cannot spend 4 years to make one film. I understand India Untouched was super popular, and thousands and thousands of DVDs were circulated, and people have put it on YouTube on their own. I have not put a single version of India Untouched on YouTube. People have. Some without permission, some with permission. I don't care. But the fact that you have to create some other systems for the oppressed communities, the experiential communities, to tell their own narratives. Because all said and done, my films have me as a maker in it. But these are not about me. I have not made a single film about me, where I have the audacity to go and make films about others. And that process is intrinsically one that has power dynamics. That as a urban, educated male, whatever, you are privileged to hold a camera in front of someone who's not as privileged. It's a privilege. You have to be very cautious not to exploit it. But even in spite of the fact that one is so conscious, the fact is, Ashish, you are troubled. It is, I am troubled. Therefore, how long should one tell other people's stories? When will people tell their own stories? And I remember when we started designing the India Unheard program, where hundreds of community people are producing their own content, very, very important activist filmmakers who will remain unnamed were not very supportive. And not because of the ideology, because they thought cinema is too complex for rural people to understand. And when I would hear something like that, for me, the immediate connect is, fuck, that's like Brahminism. That's exact Brahminism. This is exactly what the Brahminical people told non-Brahminical people: you are not worthy of education. You are not worthy of knowledge. Knowledge is a fiefdom of a certain kind of people, upper caste men or Brahminical men. I mean, I was shocked when activist filmmakers would tell me, no, I mean, how can you ever train people to make films? Like, very important, not just in India, also outside of India. They have all shut their mouth now because the political context has changed. Now, nobody dares question anybody from creating their own content on their own life. Nobody dares do that. So that stronghold of documentary makers, that, in Hindi we say, "Hamari jagir hai," this is our fiefdom. That will not fly today. So that's where the convictions come from. It's partly life experiences. It's a desire to use the tools in shaping conversations, shaping narratives, influencing certain policies if you can, and provoking discussions. And I was always a big fan of provoking discussions. And that's what all, everybody who had some contribution to do in the shaping of society, whether you call them reformers or big artists or philosophers, that's what they contributed. They helped us think through stuff. They helped us question using rationale and logic and reasoning. And I mean, it's just people like us are trying to do a small contribution in this giant thing called universe and life, you know. So I realized that rather than 18 films, 18,000 may make a little bit bigger influence. So that's the reason I'm not making my own films. It's just the time commitments.
No, quite interesting. I was trying to, while you were talking, I was trying to relate the kind of revolution that you and Sarathan has. Sarathan stood by people like Mailamma. I mean, stood in the sense literally with them. Be it sun, be it rain, whatever. During those Plachmada strike, and for all documentaries, I believe that he did that. And his last travel was also something of that sort, where that is very evident. And you're empowering people to tell their stories. I can relate to, and also the conviction is very evident. So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's. I'm very sure that if we have not succeeded in getting our work to Kerala, and I am convinced that if Sarath was alive, that would not have been the case. He would have figured out how to bring the model that we are doing into Kerala, because he understood that idea that people should create, people from within social movements should, particularly the marginalized groups, should create content and subvert the narratives. He totally understood that. And that's one bit that I miss him a lot for, because if he was there, he would have said, let's bring this model to Kerala. I'm severely limited because and things are different now. So I would like to take this opportunity of this space to say, if anybody out there, including yourself, is interested to sort of work with us to see how community content creation can be brought into Kerala, we are ready. And earlier we were concerned because of language. Now we are not, because when we started this work, communities, we call them community correspondents. So our network of community correspondents were filming and then sending DVDs over to the office for edit, because the technology that we had at that time did allow them to edit. But that has changed. Now they research, they write, they film, they edit, they publish. It's come a full circle. So even if we don't understand the language, it's fine. They understand it and they can make their stuff. So things have changed. And so if people watching this, please know that Video Volunteers is very keen to make entries into not just Kerala, but all the southern states speaking different languages. We are talking to some very interesting organizations in Tamil Nadu. So I would, it'll be fantastic. So you can write some, if you're interested, write in the comment box. And then Ashish, and if you write in Malayalam, then Ashish will have to translate it for me.
No, most definitely. It's kind of, now people have, when they do a documentary, they follow up, and they call it a movement. But then this is a real movement when I look at it. As in when,
it is a movement. It is a movement. And we just launched last month a big program called Buland Bol. Buland is a Hindi for strong. Bol means to speak. So the program is free training for online training, free online training for anybody out particularly in the villages who's interested to become a digital change maker. We teach them video making. We teach them Facebook, how to use Facebook to post. We teach them Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel management, over 5 courses. We have about 800 applications and we have just finished training about little over 200 people. So it's available, and we have fantastic trainers with us. And this is an ongoing program. So anybody interested, I can send you the link. You can drop it into your comment box, and people can, fill it up and apply. That's how we can start to engage with this movement of, creating content of your own. Enough of, outsourcing narratives and lived experiences to others. Seriously, it's enough. That's too much brokering has happened. I believe that voice, our voice, years ago, I wrote a small paper called Voice Economy. And voice, much like other commodities, are traded, stocked, black marketed. Everything that happens to a commodity happens to voice as well. So we have voice mediators, right? So traditionally, we have this political leaders, media, religious leaders. Now we have social media influencers. These are all mediators or amplifiers. But there are also, the same plot will also suppress voice, much like commodities. So if one commodity is getting very cheap, they will suppress the supply so much that the demand increases and they can increase the cost of it. So voice also works that way. And the only way to revolutionize that is to take the control off. It has to be a free play. So countries like India may have constitutional guarantees of freedom of speech, but freedom of speech does not translate to freedom of voice. The distinction I make is, speech becomes voice only when it is heard. You have to let your thoughts and opinions and life experiences be heard and heeded, not just heard, but heeded. And for that, you have access mediums, right? Traditional ways, I need access to my representative, my MLA, for my voices to be heard. I need access to my channels. I need access to my newspaper. I need access to my speech. Speech as in what Constitution describes as speech, which also includes your expressions and thoughts, to become a voice. So we don't have freedom to voice. So people like us use the freedom of speech in Article 19(1)(a), but voice is a completely separate game altogether. And what we are trying to do is to subvert that game. We cannot have a vibrant democracy without having the audacity to listen to multiple points of views. If you do not have the courage to listen to multiple points of views, you should not call yourself a democracy, which is what is happening in today's India. Right? There's only one kind of discourse that will be allowed. If you align yourself with the right-wing thought, the right-wing discourse, you will be allowed. Anything tangential will be muffled, threatened, killed, suppressed, not promoted, etc., etc. What we have is an elected autocracy, right? And a lot of middle-class people are happy with elected autocracies because they don't want to think. They have outsourced thought to other people. And that's not surprising. We have outsourced our people, those who believe in God. I don't, but those who believe in God have outsourced their journey to God also. They can't even do that bit themselves. They outsourced it to all the temples and churches and mosques and people who sit there. I mean, that's how lazy we are, that we can't even do that journey. You don't want to go take a trek. You want to watch a video of somebody trekking. I mean, that's how lazy we are. And now you can see the trend. Now there is this whole trend called reaction videos, where you're not playing a game, which in itself, like playing video game, which is itself a lazy effort to me. But you are watching someone talking about how they play a game. I mean, like, there's a height of vicarious living, right? So in that scenario, when someone says, listen, don't worry, I will think on your behalf, I will act on your behalf, I will policy make on your behalf, I will create rules on your behalf, you have to do nothing but slog. Do your 9 to 5, come back, be with your kids, watch the nonsensical stuff, and be happy. And then we call that democracy. We call that, development. And that has to be challenged. And this is not the first time this is happening. World over, history is witness to all kinds of machinations going on, where one group or one ruling party or a person wants to control the mind. Control of mind is not new, is as old as human civilization. It's not the invention of the right wing or the left wing. Everybody wants to control mind, and everybody wants to influence minds. What we do is also that. What we are doing, what we did, and what Sharad was trying to do was not to control minds, but definitely we want to influence minds. We want to present an alternate struggle, and especially present things that you don't want to see, or present things that you are not allowed to see. Right? I mean, look at the mainstream media now. I mean, all over. I don't know the situation in Kerala, but I can tell you, for rest of the most of parts of the country, especially the national media, it is still in 2022 predominated by upper caste men. All decision making of mainstream media, which is English language and Hindi, defined by not by me but media makers, is even today upper caste men. All decision makers, including print and television. How can you ever have any discourse on caste or on gender? There is not one tribal, editor. There's not one national level Dalit editor. I mean, it is shameful, to say the least, that, how do you expect these discourses to come out? The only way it will come out is when you subvert all of that and say, create your own goddamn material and put it out there. And subversion has always been active part of resistance. Subversion is a very known arsenal in all fighters, not just people with political agendas, but all kinds of reformists have used subversion. Whether it is Periyar or Ambedkar or Gandhi, everybody have used subversion, including what we read Mahabharata. Krishna's whole strategy is subversion. It's part of our ethos. So we are not doing anything new. The thing is, we are applying those to sort of political situations. So that gives you the conviction. I mean, you might be shut down, but aren't you? If a thinking human being is silenced by not words but silenced, literally silenced, then your person is as good as dead, right? So there's a saying that I think, therefore I am. So if my thought cannot reach you, if someone takes away all the means for me to be able to express and reach my thought to you, you and I don't exist as a unit. So what's the point, right? What's the point in that kind of an existence? I don't think there's any point. So that gives you enough conviction to say, whatever it is, you keep going. It's not a rocket science. It's just persistence. You learn from the ants. You learn from the ants is what I would say. They carry 100 times their own weight, body weight. And that's what they do every day. You kill a bunch of them, they still persist. So a lot of us are worker ants, no? And you just keep at it. Like you do, right? I mean, you have a channel. I was looking through your channel. There are lots of videos in there, and it's fantastic. But I was also looking at the views. Some are 300, 90, and 20. But so what? You persist. You persist. You have to occupy the digital space. You have to. When we started doing our work on the area called forcible evictions back in 2010, I asked my team, Google search forcible evictions and see how many videos come up. 0. There was not one video at that time published in India that talked about how horrible is forcible evictions. You're evicted because of a dam project or an airport project or a road expansion project. There was nothing. You try today. 80% of the content you get on the word forcible eviction or forced evictions is by video volunteers. What did we achieve? We occupied that space. You have to. So there, the views don't matter. You got to occupy. It's like, these are imprints for future generations, no? You want to understand this country. If you're really interested in understanding this country, then you better listen to voices on the ground. You want to understand what is going on in the Arab Spring and what's going on in Egypt right now, you can watch Al Jazeera or BBC or whatever you watch, but you have to find voices from the ground. They may be coarse, they may be unsophisticated, they may not have subtitles often, but you got to be patient. If you want to really understand, you have to have that and go to. Otherwise, it is like, I want to experience Silent Valley, but I can't really go there. So what do? I watch some Instagram videos. If that's who you are, then you can only watch Al Jazeera. That's fine, or BBC, or whatever you watch. If you're interested in filtered views and not real experiences, then mediated content is okay for you. But if you're interested to experience it firsthand, then either go to the communities you're interested to know, or listen to the stories of that communities, not on that community, of the community. That's what we do. Sharath would have been very happy, I'm very sure. Yeah, if he would be there, he would call me right now and say, Enda Mashe, Enda Chinepo.
This is the time. I think
This is the time. This is the time. It's about 9:30 or 10 he would call. And he would say, Uno hecho. I said, why? He said, huh? Uno kaichilingine? Kaichituli kyama? Then I would ask him, Sarada kaicho? So, which means, have you had your... So he would say, it's going on. And that's what he would usually do. He would often call me when he's with friends, he would call. And he knows I don't drink, so we would have lots of fun about that. Yeah, I miss him. I do. I do miss him. For me, it was not just a loss of a colleague and a friend and a fellow filmmaker, but he was also, to a large extent, my conduit to Kerala, my pipeline. He was. So it's a big loss, personally. Yeah. My heart goes out to his family. Yeah. I think I met his wife, but we were never in touch or, yeah. Good man. Now it's up to all of you to continue to continue what he started. And maybe you guys can start with reviving Bibgyor. That is a good thing to do. And Shashi is there, and Benny is there. Lots of good, interesting people are there. Babu's around. Kerala has a lot going on. We have to work now. So anything I can do from my side, please let me know.
Most definitely. It was, I know, we could talk hours if you're talking about Sharathatan and what you are doing, because it's really exciting, the kind of revolution that you know, and it's not in the name of revolution, the kind of conviction, as you rightly said, and which is very inspiring. So, but then because because as you rightly said, people won't watch the content if we make it longer, but we'll definitely connect again. Yeah, thank you so much, Stalin. We'll definitely connect. We have lots to talk.
Yes, thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you.